Earth is a beautiful and fascinating planet, one filled with lush forests, deep oceans, vast deserts, and towering mountains. With so many landscapes, it has been able to sustain life for millions of plant and animal species over billions of years. Earth has been here far before any of us, but it may not outlive us just as long. You see, Earth is facing a very serious problem, and that is the very real threat of climate change. Climate change is something that could eventually affect everyone on Earth, regardless of economic status, race, religion, gender, or location. If something is not done about it soon, the Earth as we know it could one day become uninhabitable. Scientists are terrified, saying that we are already on a steady path towards doomsday. But if we act sooner rather than later, there might be hope for us yet. Today, I'd like to discuss with you the effects of climate change over the last few decades, the current state of our planet, and what we can do to try and combat these effects. I've been researching this topic for the past few months in an attempt to educate myself more on it and also accurately inform others about the effects of climate change as well. To begin, I'll first be looking at the effects of climate change over the last few decades and elaborating a little bit more on just what climate change is. I'm sure many of you have heard of climate change before, if not having done your own research on it. Now, it might be easy to assume that climate change just stands for global warming, but it's a lot more encompassing than that. You see, climate change looks at things like melting of polar ice caps, rising sea levels, rising global temperatures, and overall pollution in the atmosphere. Information from NASA.gov states that the theory of global warming dates as far back as 1938, when an English engineer and inventor by the name of Guy Callendar proposed that the buildup of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere was the cause for rising temperatures. This was further built upon by a Canadian physicist named Gilbert Plass, who in 1956 developed the carbon dioxide theory of climate change. While Earth has had mostly natural fluctuations between extreme heat and extreme cold, over the last few years, there has been a giant increase in global temperatures, mostly from human activity. Indeed, all human activity, or the vast majority of it, does affect climate change and a bit of global warming. Author Kofi Rong writes in his 2016 book, Climate Change, that two major contributors to this are man-made engineering systems, these being the heat engine and the refrigerator. Now, by heat engine, that considers things like automobiles, generators, or any systems that require heat to function. By refrigerator, Wong is referring more to air conditioning units or any system that pulls the heat from a closed source and releases it out into the environment. Now, here in the United States, not every single person, or even in first world countries, have access to a car or air conditioning, but millions of us still do. With that being said, it'd be easy to point the finger at ourselves and say that we're the problem. But our own human activities, even collectively, are not the only source or contributor. Multinational companies and Fortune 500 companies are decimating the planet through poor waste disposal, first world practices, and the usage of fossil fuels. Many of these companies have remained unchecked by global governments, and the damage that they continue to do to our planet is absurd. In Fitzroy Beckford's 2019 book titled Poverty and Climate Change, he draws attention to the Cuyahoga River fire in 1969. This fire arose from poor disposal of oil from industrialized companies that felt that it was acceptable to dump their waste into Lake Erie, which Lake Cuyahoga or the Cuyahoga River directly runs into. Another noticeable case that Beckford writes of is the hole in the ozone layer that was discovered in 1982. This hole came from an accumulation of chlorofluorocarbon gases in the atmosphere. These issues were dealt with back then, but the practices that followed did not stick. In 2016, the recorded amount of CO2 in the atmosphere was at an astonishing 3.8 gigatons. Just for a bit of reference, a single gigaton is equal to, I believe, 1 million metric units. Pollution is not limited to Earth's global atmosphere either. For years, plastic waste has been floating around in various oceans. The problem has become so grand that there is now an accumulation of plastic waste in the ocean, referred to as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is essentially a floating island completely formed out of plastic and other non-biodegradable waste. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is so large that it is about twice the size of Texas or 3 times the size of France. That's a lot of garbage. We're also seeing unprecedented temperature rises. In a report provided to climate.gov by Rebecca Lindsay and Luann Dahlman, Earth's temperature has been steadily rising by 0.32 degrees Fahrenheit per decade since 1981. The report also states that the 9 years between 2013 to 2021 rank among the 10 warmest years on record. It takes a massive amount of heat to increase Earth's temperature, even slightly, so these numbers are quite concerning. Moving forward, I will be discussing what can be done to combat climate change. You might see the world changing around you and ask yourself, but what can I really do about it? And the answer is far more than you might think. On an individual level, we can start by being more conscious about the waste that we create and our methods of disposing it. Properly getting rid of trash or other waste in their appropriate receptacles doesn't take a lot of effort, and it goes a long way if it's practiced consistently. For us here in Southern California, another thing that we can actually do is go out to our local beaches. Several of us are so close to beaches in the area, and community members even go out there to do beach cleanups. Some of these groups even have social media pages, so it's really easy to stay up to date with them, which, if participating, helps keep the trash out of our oceans. Taking more public transportation is also another thing that we can do. Consistently going and utilizing our city buses, our city subway systems is a big benefactor to the environment and the state of it. Less cars on the road and less busy freeways means less pollution being pumped out. Bigger industries such as factory farming could start to change to low carbon farming techniques, which would drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. One of the biggest impacts that could be had on climate change would be if first world countries were to entirely stray away from our plastic use. Our plastic use is probably one of the most detrimental things that we can do to our planet because it's not degradable. It doesn't go away for the most part. Rather, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why you tend to hear things about microplastics. Jeremy Williams points out in his 2021 book, Climate Change is Racist, that America and Europe combined make up more than 50% of the world's CO2 emissions. When you consider the amount of waste and use that goes in and out of capitalism, those numbers aren't very surprising. But we have the ability to change that percentage. To wrap up, the study of climate change, as well as its effects on the planet, can feel very overwhelming at times. Too often, we feel defeated when asking ourselves the tough questions. What can I do about it? What can I do about automobile industry? What can I do about the fossil fuel industry? What can I do about waste in our oceans? And the answer to that one that many people don't like to hear is try. We can try to educate ourselves more on what is happening to our planet and the role that we take in that. We can try to make small and big changes in our lives to be able to combat climate change. We can try to educate others on the information that we learn to be able to pass that along. I'm not asking you to wake up tomorrow and change the world. I'm simply asking you to try. It may not come easy, but it is necessary. This is a fight not only for the planet, not for future generations, but for ourselves as well. Earth is facing a serious problem, and it is our duty to become the solution.